name is David Petty, and this is CrossFire. We're here with a podcast for you. I am a pastor in Colorado. I'm also a gamer, and this whole thing we've started as a effort to reach out to gamers, to reach out with a faith perspective, also with our latest gaming news. And I'm here with my co-host, and I will allow him to introduce himself.
I'm Russ Dornish. I'm a youth pastor in Montana. Been gaming since I could walk, I think, which based on my age was the Super Nintendo. And two things that I love talking about are God and video games. So, getting with David, I figured let's start talking about this and putting this together in an actual podcast/show.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I was gonna say probably I've been gaming since about the Super Nintendo, but maybe even before. I think the first game that I ever remember playing was a game called Math Rescue for my 386 computer, my IBM compatible 386. Yeah, good times.
Oh yeah, no, that's great. We've come a long way since that.
We've come a long way. Yeah, when I was a kid, my parents told me that the Nintendo broke your screen. So I didn't play any NES growing up other than when I was at friends' houses. So I was always over at friends' houses so I could play NES or whatever.
No, that's awesome.
So we're going to start in today's podcast with the latest news, whatever's happening in the world. Russ and I have kind of handpicked from a few different sources. We'll tell you the source and the author, read a little bit of the news, and then we're going to talk about it. We'll transition through a bunch of those, and then we're just going to have a good conversation. So Russ, do you want to start off? You want me to start us off with our first news article?
Let me start off because this one kind of, I think, ties to a lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about. But so the first article I have is from the New York Times, and the title is "Gaming Sales Are Up, but Production is Down," and it is written by Jason Schreier, and it's probably what all of us have been thinking, which is everybody's buying games, playing games more than ever. But this quarantine is going to have a long-lasting effect on the gaming industry that is negative here in a little bit. So we are going to hit a gaming lull. And a lot of the discussion and talk in the article is about the fact that since people started working from home, it's not just the production side of things that's going to be seeing a decline, which a lot of people have talked about, of just being able to create physical discs and get them out to consumers. It's the idea that as this goes on and people are working from home, the production side of things are really taking a hit. People are not able to do the same stuff that they were before. And honestly, they're ending up having to burn out to keep up with the work and demand that they have normally. So we could be seeing a very bad time in the gaming industry coming up for a lot of the games.
Yeah, so you're talking about production versus productivity. That your game developers are not able to be productive at home. I know I've got a good friend who works at Google, and they were saying, once you take away the free food and free bus and free everything, and then you add back in your family in that mix, it's surprising how much less stuff you can get done than when you're on site, on campus, 20 hours a day with all you can eat buffet,
Well, and that's one side of it, but then, so obviously the biggest culprit of this that started this whole talk was The Last of Us 2 being delayed. And that has kind of started a trickle-down effect that I don't think people are realizing is going to happen. The Last of Us wasn't just delayed because it wasn't ready to be released. It wasn't just delayed because, they're having issues. Even though it's already been delayed 2 times before this, it's something completely different, and I think it's going to continue down. I think games that we see coming out in the fall are probably not going to come out in the fall. So games like The Avengers, Cyberpunk 2077.
Don't hurt me so bad.
It's not going to look good. I would be very shocked if we see a lot of those games in 2020 and they aren't pushed back to 2021, depending on what happens. So,
yeah. Well, and I think we're going to see that with all media. I think Hollywood, TV, it's going to be interesting to see who's able to produce media in the coming years. And I don't know. It's an interesting world we're going to live in. But let me piggyback off of that and jump into my next article, which is from GameSpot by Jeremy Winslow, posted on April 21st. And it says people are spending way more money on games in the U.S. during the coronavirus pandemic. According to this, the NPD Group has revealed some new statistics about video game industry, concluding that spending on accessories, hardware, and software in March 2020 has increased by 35% in the past year. This brings total revenue up to $1.6 billion, the most spent on video games in a March month since March 2008's $1.8 billion. It says the marketing research firm split the numbers by category. So then it goes on to say that despite the uptick in sales, however, year-to-date spending in video games declined by 3% to $905 million, and year-to-date spending across gaming accessories, hardware, and software totaled to $3 billion, declining 4% when compared to last year. So I think this is an interesting uptick in video game sales, just like you were talking about. Lots of people spending their time playing video games, buying video games. But as we'll find out later in some of our news, not everybody's able to get their hands on what they want.
No, and that is definitely true. It's something we've talked about before even coming on this, was just that things are starting to be scarce around everywhere in the gaming industry, just because people are so desperate to buy games. And I don't know. It's been hard. It's been really hard. There's a decent amount of new games coming out, but I mean, at least this time's helping with the backlog. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, do you want me to jump into the next one, or you want to jump into the next one?
What do you got with the next one?
So I've got that Nintendo is ramping up their production so that you can finally buy a Switch. Like we were just talking about, lots of people out there playing video games. I know myself, my wife and I have been playing some Animal Crossing. Nice way to just pass the time. Very peaceful, right? This is not like, the world's out there dealing with this global pandemic. Let's get inside and deal with the pandemic. Have not been feeling like playing Division too much lately. But Animal Crossing, talking with cute animals, fishing, building your home. It's been very peaceful and fun. But a bunch of my friends are saying they can't get their hands on a Nintendo Switch. So this article comes from digitaltrends.com, written by Will Nicole on April 21st. And it says, Nintendo is ramping up production of the Nintendo Switch amid widespread shortages of the in-demand console, according to a report published in the Nikkei Asian Review. It says the Kyoto-based game developer says it expects to produce about 10% more units of the Switch series in 2020, up from around 20 million last year, according to parts suppliers informed of the plans. The report said the company does not make the device itself, but has asked multiple suppliers and contract assemblers to prepare for additional production in the April-June quarter. That's welcome news for people who have been wanting to buy a Switch while trapped in quarantine. It says, as they reported back in February, the outbreak of COVID-19 in China was wreaking havoc on the world's electronics production, much of which happens in China.
This is just like a perfect storm right now. You've got an issue closing down the world, so production and stuff has to be on pause. On top of that, you have everybody staying in their houses, majority of people losing their jobs and still getting paid technically because of the unemployment help and stuff like that. And they need something to pass the time. And what better way than to pass the time with games? And it's just been crazy to see. I know here in Montana, I've seen the third, secondary market of people trying to resell Switches. They're trying to get, $400, $500, $600 for a Switch that, doesn't cost that much.
That's nuts. It doesn't do 4K. Doesn't do HDR. But you can play Animal Crossing, which you cannot do on a PlayStation.
I think that's the key. I mean, gosh, they couldn't have come out Animal Crossing at the most perfect time. I mean, honestly, right now, any new game that's coming out is seeing an uptick in sales. I just saw Final Fantasy VII is at 7.5 million sold.
Nice.
In their first 3 days on the market. And it's the fastest selling Final Fantasy game of all time. That itself is going through, a ton of sales. Animal Crossing. It's crazy ridiculous right now, but you got to be wondering how the executives are feeling knowing that they can't get the product in people's hands fast enough.
Right. Well, and it's also interesting. I was going to pull up the article, but I don't have it. The World Health Organization, of course, who a couple years ago came out with the article officially saying that gaming addiction was an official disorder, right? And so people who are addicted to games, which is something I hope to at some point talk about on this podcast, is where do you draw the line with gaming addiction? Certainly not a thing to take lightly. But World Health Organization changing their tune and saying, what's one of the best things you can do while you're stuck in this pandemic and you're stuck indoors? Go play more video games, right? So like this is the advice from the World Health Organization. Stay inside, play games.
Well, I mean, think about it now with games that immerse yourself. You said it yourself, Animal Crossing. I mean, all Animal Crossing really is living out your life in this little fun digital world, and you're doing menial tasks that, you know, people don't want to do in real life. On top of that, think about like VR right now. I mean, how huge is VR right now for people that have it at home that can use it to go visit places that they were supposed to travel to, or, you know, meet with people, or things like that. It's just, these are things that I think are going to take off even more after this pandemic.
Now, do you have a VR headset?
I do.
Okay,
I've had the PlayStation VR since launch.
Nice.
Since the pandemic, I have gotten back into it. I didn't have it set up even since I moved here. And I finally got my space done, and I've been playing it. The bad part about it is my wife thinks it's hilarious to come in when I'm playing and scare me to death because I don't know she's there.
Going like this.
That's exactly what it looks like. She finds it hilarious that I even
she
do that.
She sneaks up behind you and like taps you on the shoulder. It's like
every time I scream the moment she does it because I can't hear her. But it's
and this is where I thought the HoloLens could be so cool. Like, where did that thing go? The idea of like a VR environment where you can actually also be in your current environment, you know, kind of an AR. I don't know. I do think that's one of the biggest things that VR has going against it right now is that, you know, for somebody to be in a space but not be aware of their surroundings, that's just hard. I mean, that's difficult. So
it is. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting time right now. There's so many different repercussions and things happening. Which, if we want to talk about that, if we want to talk about short supply and trying to get things in people's hands.
Yeah, why don't you jump into that next...
my next article talks about, and we're going to kind of transition into next-gen news, which is the idea that PS5 already announced that they're only going to be creating about 6.5 million units in the first few months, which is about 1 million units less than what they did with the PS4, which, by the way, the PS4 had some shortages when it first came out. So to subtract 1 million from that and do a worldwide launch, there's going to be some big scarcity when it comes to the PS5. Microsoft has been very quiet with that. I'm going to imagine they're going to be in a similar boat.
I was just going to ask if Microsoft had any
they haven't said
any
anything.
Expectations.
No, not yet. So my guess is they're just being a little bit quiet until they can get an actual like figure what that out is going to be like. But so we're in a next-gen console year during a pandemic.
Yeah.
Games are delayed everywhere. They're not going to be coming out. What do you think your expectations are with next-gen?
Did you say where your article was coming from?
That one? No, I don't have that one.
Oh, okay.
I need to pull that one up.
That's just an abstract reference. Yeah, so but right, so we're not going to see Xbox consoles in mass. We're not going to see PlayStation consoles in mass. But you know what we are going to see, Russ? According to this article that I found on TechRadar.com by Vic Hood, we could see PS5 and Xbox Series X games sooner than expected. Game trailers, that is. It says here, we already knew that E3 2020's cancellation would have an impact on planned game announcements and reveals this year, especially given that the next-gen consoles are due to release in late 2020. But while some announcements may be delayed, others have been brought forward, meaning that we could see PS5 and Xbox Series X games line up sooner than expected. Can I just take a pause and say, when are we going to change the name of Xbox Series X? Because I hate saying it. Anyway.
XSX?
The Xbox Series X. Yeah. Anyway. So it goes on to say that that's according to prominent industry analyst Daniel Ahmad, who tweeted that E3's 2020 cancellation has meant that many announcements and reveals have been moved and that the first proper next-gen showcase will be much earlier.
Well...
Says, let me finish up the article here. It says, either way, we can't wait to get a sneak peek at some Xbox Series X games, PS5 games, because after all, isn't that the most exciting part of a next-gen console? So far, we don't know any of Sony's first-party PS5 titles. And on the Microsoft first-party side, we only know of Halo Infinite and Hellblade 2, but there have been plenty of third-party games revealed for both. It's worth noting that while Ahmad is a reliable industry source, any rumors should be treated with skepticism. Let's hope we don't have to wait long until this showcase is confirmed, whoever is in it.
So that article did forget there is one PS5 game that has been announced and shown. Godfall was the first game revealed for PS5. You'll have to check out the trailer some other time. It is a looter shooter, like but with swords.
Gravity. Godfall reveal. Okay, I will have to check it out.
So here's the thing with all of this.
What is the thing, Russ?
We obviously had the weirdest PlayStation 5 semi-reveal with their GDC announcement that you and I literally fell asleep through.
That was so bad.
But again, I think
Can I mimic the backdrop here? Oh, my lighting is not working. I was gonna try.
What I want to do is one of this podcast. We need to have a studio audience. Just don't move.
This is it.
Don't move. Here's my audience. David is watching.
I can't do it.
So we get the weird reveal, and I think part of that had to do with what's going on in the world. They had to show something. Right. The way that Sony's been handling this, they've just been having to do detours, and I know people have given them a hard time, but part of it, they said, like the new controller they announced, they just put up a blog saying what the new controller was.
That's right, yeah.
They said the reason they did that was because they were sending the new controller out and they knew it would get leaked. So they had to do something on a whim because they don't have any other way of showing this off.
Yeah, they just want to stay ahead of it. Makes sense.
So we're going to see that here now in probably the next month or two with both Microsoft and Sony having to put together like videos or blog posts or something with more info and showing the games that they would have been showing at E3.
Right.
So
and you figure some of these things, I mean, the press kits are already ready. The media is already ready. The write-ups are all ready. I mean, the only things they didn't do were box up their trade show, backdrops and stages and things like that. And most of that's done by third-party companies anyway. So sad shout out to the third-party trade show companies who are not producing any trade shows. But yeah, so all of that stuff is ready to go. It's in the queue.
I can only imagine being a developer and looking forward to that so much to like show off something that you have. And now that's all on hold. And it's like, I don't know when this is going to happen. Do we even show some of our games that we were going to come out in the fall if we don't think we're going to hit fall?
I mean, totally left field comment here, but I watched a thing with, I think it was Jimmy Fallon was talking to Anna Kendrick about Trolls 2 and saying, here's this like Trolls 2 World Tour. And it's like, hey, everybody, it's available in your homes now. Enjoy.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, there's no opening weekend. There's no, like, this is going to be one of those things you have to have an asterisk next to, movie numbers.
Going forward for the next year.
It's like opening weekend sales. By the way, this was all online, and which was interesting. I saw that, what was it? So Onward was one of the movies that came out and you could buy it for $20. When Trolls 2 came out, you could only rent it for $20. I thought that was an interesting distinction. Totally off topic, but that's neither here nor there.
Media, all the sorts of fun things, we can talk about it all. But what do you think your plans are with next gen? What were your plans going into the fall, with these consoles being launched and coming from your perspective? We both have a little bit of different lives, and what was kind of your expectation and thinking on that?
I don't know. I mean, I think so I come from a PC background. Like, I was a diehard PC gamer growing up. I some of it, as I explained, was because my parents wouldn't let me have a console. So I went from, Math Rescue to eventually playing the first and second Tomb Raider and all those other good PC games in the early days.
A little bit of Oregon Trail.
Yeah, some Oregon Trail, some, Civilization 4, Solitaire. No, I don't know. But all those early PC games, Command and Conquer, StarCraft, Warcraft. Anyway, and so then when I finally, later in life, I was like, okay, I'm an adult now. I'm going to buy my first console. So my first console as an adult was a Nintendo Switch, not a Nintendo Switch, was a Nintendo Wii, because I loved the Wii Sports. I loved the Wii controllers. I loved the fact that it got me up off the couch doing something. And the Wii board too, which kind of doubled as a scale. You step on the Wii board and then you weigh yourself in. Anyway, it was great. Totally a different console experience. But then later on, I decided I was gonna get a real console, and it was between the Xbox and the PlayStation. And for me, what it came down to was exclusives. When I looked at the Xbox, all those games I could play on my gaming PC. When I looked at the PlayStation, I could not play Days Gone, Last of Us. I guess at that point Days Gone wasn't out, but Days Gone, Last of Us, Horizon Zero Dawn,
Horizon Zero
God
Dawn.
of War, Spider-Man, Uncharted. I mean, it was like a dozen games that I said, okay, I can't play these games unless I buy a PlayStation. And I had a good friend who said, I will loan you my PlayStation just so you can play The Last of Us. And I was like, well, that's a pretty solid testimony to this game.
Oh yeah.
So I bought a PlayStation 4 Pro, and I've never looked back. So probably when it comes to next gen, I think still exclusives, PS5, probably where I'm going to be going with that. I do like the ray tracing. I do like the Xbox Series X form factor. I think that's neat, but I also think it's not anything I'm not going to be able to get. So everything I could get with the Xbox Series X, I'm literally going to be able to get the same games, same performance, same experience out of a PC. What are your thoughts?
It's a tough one. See, I've been console gaming for most of my life. Being younger, I would dabble or try to dabble in PC gaming. But obviously being a kid, it was based on what my parents put together. And of course, no games worked on our computer. I don't know how many times we bought a game and had to return it because the specs didn't work. So at that point, my parents were like, here, we're getting you a console. We're getting you the games you want. We don't have to worry about if it works or not and have to deal with going back and forth. So I was lucky in that sense. And growing up, I had most consoles, depending on what was happening. And since obviously leaving home and being on my own, I've been able to pick up everything. So I have an Xbox, I have a PlayStation, I have a Switch. I would say my main gaming though is on my PlayStation because I grew up a PlayStation gamer. I got PlayStation 1 for Christmas one year and it was amazing. Loved it. PlayStation 2 when launch happened, I wanted a PlayStation 2 at launch. My parents wanted to get me one, but it was so scarce that we couldn't get one. So what I ended up doing for a long time was I would get together my allowance and I would rent a PlayStation 2 from our grocery store.
What?
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
Hold on. Grocery stores rent, did I miss this period of time, or was it back in the period where I still thought
rental
games
stores inside the grocery store
that rented you an entire PlayStation console?
They had systems that you could rent for a week with games. I mean,
next thing you're going to tell me people rented VHS tapes.
I could also tell you that people rented VCRs.
I guess, yeah.
They had all of that. So I rented a PlayStation 2 for weeks on end until we could eventually, grab one.
Just so you could play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater.
No, Grand Theft Auto. It was all about. Okay. It was all about that Grand Theft Auto 3.
Okay.
Grand Theft Auto 3.
I did play for PC Grand Theft Auto 1 and 2. Very impressed by the games, actually. Fun.
Oh, but, no, I played those, but 3 was where it was at. I mean, that was it. But so I mean, I've grown up on PlayStation. I've the only time I did veer from it was the PlayStation 3 debacle, because as a kid who saved up, lawn mowing money and allowance money, and I got all excited for my PlayStation 3, and then they announced that it's $600, and I'm crushed as a child because I'm that's going to take me another year to save up for. Yeah. And then here comes Xbox to save the day with a 360 for, half the cost almost. And so I ended up picking a 360. So
sure,
that was a little bit different, but yeah, I mean, I'll be day one, at least on the PlayStation 5. I'll eventually get an Xbox probably sometime next year, when some games start coming out for it that I really want. But yeah, that's me. I love the day one experience. I had the day one experience with PS4, which is so much fun to pick up something you've never tried and get it at home, box, turn it on, and get to experience it all firsthand for the first time ever, because we don't get that often now. Yeah. Because of, the internet. So it's going to be a fun year.
The thing I forgot to talk about with my experience with PC was part of, I played some games growing up, those math rescue games. But what I forgot about was when I got to high school, some of my friends were diehard PC gamers, and they were playing Counter-Strike and Half-Life and Thief and all those kind of games. And so at that point, I started hanging out with that crowd, and my brother-in-law had bought me for Christmas a new hard drive for the computer. He's like, "Yeah, I hear you're filling it up. You gotta, here's a new hard drive." Next present I open up is like RAM. And the next present I open up is
there it goes.
A graphics card. The next present I open up is a case. Next present I open it. So finally all this stuff, and he's like, "This is your new computer. You just have to figure out how to build it." And so from then on, I mean, I built computers for 10 years after that. And I was just constantly saving up my money for the next graphics card. All the while, of course, thinking my friends were idiots playing on consoles, no offense. Because here
fine.
I am playing at 1600 by 1200, and y'all are playing at your 800 by 600 on the PlayStation 2. I'm like, the graphics are so much better on PC. But I mean, I used to literally haul my physical desktop computer and my 27-inch CRT monitor, and I would haul it to my friend's house in the garage back before anybody had broadband, but we had Ethernet cards so that we could set up LAN parties.
Oh, yeah.
Play Counter-Strike together. So
no.
My diehard is the PC side, but I've been kind of out of the PC side for a while because, adulting and kids and pastoring, and it's and there's the piece, there's the tiny piece of my history where I did own an Xbox One S for 2 weeks.
We'll have to delve into that story sometime and go through
we'll get into
when we
that
kind of
another
talk
time.
about your gaming history.
Why
even
did I
deeper.
own an Xbox for 2 weeks?
So
that'll be fun.
Let's transition then from console gaming, because my last story, I think what we want to talk about the most is kind of the revolution happening right now with game streaming.
Okay, do you want to go there, or do you want to go to the ray tracing?
You could throw out the ray tracing with the next gen games.
Okay,
because it is a little bit fascinating.
Yeah, so I think so the article I have here, again from digitaltrends.com, Minecraft RTX ray tracing, the win that NVIDIA needs. And it just kind of goes on to talk about ray tracing in Minecraft, how Minecraft ray tracing is literally a game changer. I mean, I will say, as a Minecraft player for a while, I've got a friend who's got a server we've been playing on for 7 years now. And eventually, we transitioned the whole server, started up a Minecraft for Windows 10 server, so new server, same group. But we've been playing on it for a while, and anything that I could do to improve those graphics, to look at the things that we've spent literally years building as a group of friends, but to bring realistic lighting, I mean, it would just blow my mind to be able to see some of those things with realistic shaders, realistic lighting, and yet
it looks
still
amazing.
with the building blocks of Minecraft.
It looks amazing. I think people should go out and watch the videos of ray tracing in Minecraft, and you'll be like, holy crap. I think it kind of tells you what kind of things we could see from ray tracing in the future. I just don't. For me, it's like people don't play Minecraft because it looks good. They play Minecraft because. So it's a great add-on. It's a great way to see where we're gonna go in the future. And both consoles are touting ray tracing as being one of the huge features. Right. Yeah. So it's gonna be interesting bringing that to the console space, because ray tracing on a computer is pretty expensive to get to. And so that's part of the thing people are kind of weary about, because they're just like, how are consoles that cost $400, $500, $600 going to get ray tracing into their games? So it'll be interesting to see, but I do agree, being able to show that off to people and say, this is what ray tracing gets you, and using Minecraft, I think that is a huge win, because.
And I think for me, it's a matter of, Minecraft is the digital version of Legos, right? You can build anything you want. You can use materials. And to me, ray tracing is the Lego Technic, right? It takes it to the next level, and it just says, this thing is not just a toy anymore. You can build some amazing stuff. Yeah. And so to take that and say, you can build some amazing stuff, and the graphics are almost good enough that you could render I don't know. It's amazing. And I think something that's so well known, I also just want to say, kudos to Microsoft for squeezing every last dollar out of their $3.8 billion acquisition of the Minecraft property, back in, what was that, 2006 or something like that. they've done really well with it. They've actually, I was worried when they took it over that they were going to botch it, but I've been impressed.
No, it's amazing to see what they've done. They definitely got their money back tenfold, so that was a great investment on their half. But I think anybody could have showed you can do that if you just, do enough with Minecraft.
Now, do you think that ray tracing would be available in the xCloud?
Oh, yeah, I think 100%. 100%. I mean, it's the whole idea. It's streaming gaming should be able to get us the best graphics we've ever had for the cheapest amount of money possible if things go right. But things are not going right. Things are not well in how this has happened, which is why we want to talk about game streaming. Yeah. So the big news is NVIDIA GeForce Now, which I have had experience with long before Stadia came out, because I have a NVIDIA Shield streaming device, and it allowed me to play GeForce Now for the last 4 years for free. And it finally came out of beta just a couple months ago, and things have not gone well for them because everybody's jumping ship. So article that I have is from Tech Radar, and it is by Matt Hansen, literally posted 13 hours ago. And it is NVIDIA GeForce in trouble as Xbox and Warner Brothers games leave the service. So the way that NVIDIA GeForce Now works is it connects to your library, whether it's Steam, I believe Epic does it as well, Ubisoft. It connects to your computer accounts for those, and if you have games on those accounts, it allows you to play them through the GeForce service, which is weird because the way that it works is you connect to your own personal computer in like the GeForce NVIDIA, warehouse.
Somebody's
and it
closet.
lets you use it's somebody closet. They let you use their supercomputer to stream the game to your computer, TV, phone, all this stuff. Great idea in theory. The problem is that publishers are a little upset because they have now started to charge for the service, and publishers aren't technically getting a piece of the pie. Because it's not a games service. You're not buying games. You're using games you already have on another platform, but they're not getting any kickbacks. So that's why these systems and these games are jumping ship, is because so far, like I said, just now, Xbox and Warner Brothers have left. A couple weeks ago, Activision left, and then 2K Games also left. So 4 very big publishers with a lot of games that now are unplayable on this service. The nice thing is you're not losing access to those games. You can still play them on Steam and wherever else you have them. You just lose another option. So have you at all had experience? Have you at all delved into GeForce Now yet?
Yeah, so I tried GeForce Now for like a day, and I couldn't get it to work. It was about my same experience. No, it was a better experience than my experience with the Xbox Game Pass for PC. But that's not technically streaming, but I couldn't get it to work at all. Like any game, that was just rough. But no, I got a Stadia at launch. I was on the beta back when it was called Google Project Stream, and it was just Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And I was blown away by it. I mean, I played Assassin's Creed Odyssey on my laptop in the Denver airport, and I'm playing this AAA game at 1080p. It's streaming beautifully. I also found a lot of promise for it, because I'm very fortunate out where I live to have gigabit fiber to the curb. So when I bought my PlayStation 4, I've got that hooked up to my gigabit fiber, same airport, same Wi-Fi. I'm able to play my PlayStation from home. And I'm thinking, if I can play my PlayStation from home with very little lag, so here I am on my computer using an Xbox controller, a PS4 controller emulator to log into my PS4 to play Red Dead Redemption 2 the day of launch. And some guy looks over my shoulder and he's like, "How are you doing that?" And I was like, "Magic? Fairies?" I don't know.
The cloud.
But yeah, so it's the cloud, it's the power of the internet. And I remember at some point thinking, the time will come when the internet gets fast enough and latency gets low enough that this kind of stuff is possible. So Stadia comes out, Google comes out, and they think, this is the time. And they have a ton of huge promises. Controller looks amazing. Wi-Fi controller, can switch from an iOS device to your laptop to your TV. Any Chromecast will be able to stream this stuff. And then they totally blow it out of the gate. And so far it's been, Wi-Fi controller doesn't work unless it's wired on the PC. Still no iOS app. Still only available on Google phones and now some Android phones. They didn't have 4K that they said they were going to have in Chrome browsers. Originally, it was only if you had a Chromecast Ultra, and only the Chromecast Ultra that came with your Stadia until they released a new firmware update. A lot of people complained about the limited number of titles. I wasn't so concerned about that because you look at like the PS4 didn't release with that many titles. Most game consoles don't release with a huge library of titles. Those titles build up over time. I do think it still has potential. The other thing that I remember we were talking about was the long game, right? Where NVIDIA is working on technology, xCloud is working on technology, PlayStation Now is working on the technology side. Stadia has invested heavily in the games, and I think the question is, can Stadia pull it off when it comes to the actual games themselves? The reason I bought my PlayStation was because of the games, not because of the technology.
Exactly.
If Google can pull out some AAA games, I think this could be a real front runner for streaming gaming in 2021, 2022. But it's going to depend on whether those three major standalone studios, Jade Raymond, and who was the other person that Google poached from?
That would be Shannon Studstill, who was the head of Santa Monica and one of the head producers on God of War.
Yeah, so I mean, you've got Shannon Studstill from God of War, and Jade Raymond, known for the Assassin's Creed series. I mean, these are not cheap people. These are not people who are new to game development. I mean, this is like putting together a new baseball team and going out and hiring, Randy Johnson to be your star pitcher, and hiring Tony Gwynn to play, right field and bat, and Ricky Henderson's going to steal the bases. I mean, they are putting together an all-star team, but it's not for this year. This year it's still in beta. And that's part of my problem is the marketing that they said it was a release. It was really a beta.
So
versus things like Fortnite and PUBG. Here we are in like the 4th year of their existence, and they still technically claim early release.
Here's where I think they misstepped. They misstepped in the planning process of this. They had somebody maybe, I think, helping out from the gaming space, like somebody big like these two people that they've brought in since then, and kind of, how are we going to do this? What's the best way we're going to do this with gamers? It would have been better to start off by saying, let's do a beta. Let's offer this for free for a little bit for people, give them 1 or 2 games. Let's see how it works. Let's go from there and then do a full launch announcement, and go from there. The problem is that because of the misstep that they had and because of where they're at and because of the way that most of the gaming world views Stadia, besides people who love Stadia, who've used it and really do, you get this bad, talk about it, and it's going through the community of other gamers where they're just like, this is a joke. I'm not even going to go near Stadia with a 10-foot pole because look how bad it is. When in fact, it's a good service. It works. My only problem with your comment on the whole, when systems launched, they launched, with only a few games. Agreed. However, Stadia is launching with games that are over a year or 2 years old that I can go pick up for $10 on my PlayStation and play. So it's like, what's my incentive to play these on Stadia? Right. What's going to get me to that next level? Oh, you're going to get me, awesome 4K graphics and ultra settings on the computer that I could never get with my PlayStation. Great, I'm in. That's what sold me. Launch day comes. We're not getting 4K or anything on. It looks the same as my PlayStation Pro on an OLED 4K TV that I have. And I'm like, well, what is my incentive to play this in this ecosystem?
Right. Well, and I think some of it has always been, my thought behind Stadia has always been that if Stadia can, when you look at Google, right? I mean, Google has always played this kind of long-range game with disruptive technologies, with early adopters who then become the main, right? If you look at things like Google Drive and Google Docs, right? I would say Google Drive and Google Docs are probably the #1 file sharing service right now.
Oh, yeah.
#1 cloud documentation. When it first came out, everybody's like, why do you need Google Docs? Like, I've got Microsoft Word. but they weren't aiming for the people who already had Microsoft Word. They're aiming at the people who don't want to spend $110 on Microsoft Office, and they want to get this free cloud-based documentation. Then everybody looks at the fact that you can collaborate, the fact that it's really mobile, the fact that you can go out there and without having a nice desktop computer, you can log in from any device and you can get your access to your documents. So, I think that when you look at that, their target market is not the gamers. And so in some ways, I even would say a thing that I didn't think about until you were talking is they don't want to use people who are in the gaming space to tell them how to run this thing, because this is a disruptive technology, right? This is eating the big fish of the games industry. Eating the Big Fish, by the way, book shout out. That was a book I read back when I was in marketing. But it talks about how do you as the little fish eat the big fish? Well, you don't eat the big fish by saying, hey, big fish, where are you going? I'm going to follow you and then try to eat you in the process, right? You have to take a completely different, completely disruptive strategy and say, we're going to do something completely different. And so when you look at how many people do not have consoles, do not want to spend, the new PS5, the new Xbox Series X, there are people out there who don't have $500-600 to spend on a new console, extra controller, cables, and they could spend literally $20 on a Bluetooth controller and the devices they already have and the Wi-Fi they already have, and then just buy whatever games, and they could be playing AAA games tomorrow in their living room if Stadia can get their act together.
Well, and I think I agree 100%. I think that's where they should go. I think that's 100% their target audience that they need to go after. The problem was when it first got announced, I think they really tried to go after the gamer of play on the go. That's the big thing. You're going to be able to take 4K gaming, unbelievable games on the go with you so that you don't have to have your console with you when you go to a hotel, an airport, all that. Great. The problem is, again, it doesn't work on every platform. We're
right.
missing platforms, so it's not I can game anywhere. No, I have to game.
You don't have the proliferation of 5G yet, so a lot of people are trying to play 4G, and they're not. They disabled it, So the other thing I think is some of the YouTube integration. It's one of my favorite quotes. We were talking to a friend of mine who works on Stadia, and somebody asked him, so is Stadia planning to do anything with game streaming? Are you planning to launch any sort of platform like Twitch or, some sort of innovative game streaming platform? And my friend said, yeah, we've been working really long and hard on it. And I think we're going to call it YouTube. Right. Google has the platform. If they want to attack game streaming, if they could get Stadia A up and running, and if they could get it B with some amazing titles, and C in the hands of some of your content creators who can then share that stuff on YouTube, that would be a game changer too for saying, hey, you're watching Ninja play Fortnite. Do you want to play Fortnite with Ninja? Click here and boom, you're in the queue with him. You're watching this other streamer play, through this level on Tomb Raider. Do you want to try this level? Boom, you're in the game. And you're trying that level 6 seconds later. And that was what they demoed at the Game Developers Conference. And we still haven't seen it.
Well, and here's my thing. And it's, I know a lot of Stadia users that get mad when this stuff's brought up and all that. But the problem is Stadia got a head start. They got a head start. Other people are developing their own streaming. Amazon's close to launching theirs. They've talked about that. It's coming soon. xCloud is in beta. It's eventually going to launch. So it's you've got this head start that you could saturate the market. But if you don't fix what you have and get it going before these big boys come to play in a sense of the gaming sphere, not saying that Google's not a big boy. Obviously, they have probably the most resources of anybody.
Have a couple bucks.
If Xbox launches xCloud and say they attach Game Pass to xCloud, so let's say $14 a month. $14 a month, you don't need a console. You get access to Game Pass, and you can play anywhere. iOS, Android, computer, all that. And this happens, let's say, this fall with the launch of Xbox Series X. Google's in trouble. Because why would I do
Stadia,
that?
Because Stadia is free.
Well, yeah.
Stadia costs nothing to get 720 graphics.
Okay.
Right? And not your 4K 60 FPS, but it's essentially the promise is that the service is completely free, which brings me to my last article that says, with its free service, Stadia is starting to make sense. This comes from Eurogamer, article by Thomas Morgan. It says Stadia is now free, or rather any Google user can sign up for the service and access the games library without having to subscribe to the Pro tier, or the firm's controller, or the Chromecast Ultra 4K receiver. It says you can get it completely for free. Anybody who has any Google account can go on and sign up for free. It says here, let's see, the big improvement with obvious gameplay advantages, but wasn't the case closed. Even in this ideal network setup, we encountered frustrations. The next day we tried it, and again, identical conditions, and our results went straight back to the high values we had in the initial testing. Opening the door to the idea of stripping out all devices from our network wasn't the solution, right? So it just gets back to the thing that I keep hearing over and over again, is people are struggling with Stadia. And when they are struggling with Stadia, they go to people like Google and say, hey, Google, why is Stadia not working? Google kicks it back and says, well, because your internet sucks. And then you go round and round. Whereas with a PlayStation, if your PlayStation's not working, it's Sony's fault. So Stadia is starting to make sense, but still is a struggle. But check it out for yourself.
Oh, no, I recommend everybody give it a try, especially with it free right now. Go give it a try, see what it's like. The difference, though, what I was saying was, if you attach Game Pass to it, I'm telling you that not only are you getting access to this online console for $14 a month, you're getting access to 400 games right then and there.
Right.
Google Stadia free, you don't get those games, and you're going to be paying a premium on those games.
No,
right now.
But Google has, again, this is a promise, Google has attached itself to Uplay with Ubisoft, and once Uplay Plus and Ubisoft get themselves on Google, if you've got Uplay Plus, you'll be able to access all of those games with Stadia. So once again,
but is that going to be for Pro?
It's a question of content. What's that?
Is that going to be though for Pro? Are you going to have to pay for Pro?
No, that should be, if you pay for Uplay Plus, you should be able to get the 720p gaming experience.
No, I get you, but you're going to be playing for Uplay Plus.
Right. So if you really want the Uplay Plus and the 4K, right, and this is where all these things start to break down, is you start looking
adding up.
Okay, so I'm paying for Uplay Plus, and I'm paying for Xbox monthly, and I'm paying for PlayStation monthly, and so you look at it over the course of 4 years of console development, and you say, well, holy crap, I'm spending like $1,200 so I can have access to this free console in the cloud. I think that's where everybody's going to have to justify their price points.
If GeForce Now and Stadia could have merged and had a baby where I can play the games I already own on Steam anywhere, I would happily pay for that, with the condition that it's Google's better infrastructure and better streaming.
Right.
GeForce Now works. It's okay. It has its issues, but it doesn't have what Google is doing with cloud gaming. So it's almost like, if Google could have partnered with Xbox.
Yeah, I think the other struggle that Stadia is having, right, that one of their mottos is Stadia, one place for everything you play, is that they're aiming at the PC market and the console market, right? Because you can access Stadia, and I can switch from my PC where I'm playing with a keyboard and a mouse, and then I can go into my living room and I can hop on my Chromecast and I'm playing with the Stadia controller. So that means that every game that comes to their platform, they have to make sure it's got keyboard and mouse support and controller support. So I feel like there's even more of a challenge when you're looking at that. Plus, just getting developers to develop for that new platform has to be a struggle. Because it's a gamble. And that's where we've seen the NVIDIA folks are jumping ship from developing for that platform. If Google can keep people on their ship for long enough to actually get out to sea, avoid some of the rough, choppy weather, I think it could be smooth sailing. My prediction is 2 years for Google Stadia.
And that's where they could run into trouble, because if xCloud launches and it's, this good enough service that has all these people following it and can offer the Xbox games that people love, and let's be honest, and I'm going to make fun of, some of the Xbox gamers, but it's the whole idea of, that 13-year-old, 12-year-old kid who wants to play, Gears of War or Halo, and his mom is able to do that for him for $14 a month.
Yeah.
You're gonna end up doing that in that sense. But I agree. I mean, I think Stadia had the right idea. They had the great plan. all the stuff they promised day one would have been amazing, and it would have sold the product to a lot of people. That botch launch is going to have some repercussions, and hopefully they can stick it out and, get past that. And
even if they could become a viable third platform, I mean, even if they could just be like, that every year instead of the debate between Xbox and PlayStation, and then like Nintendo's doing their own thing, playing Animal Crossing on the side. I feel like we need a viable third contender just to help push development, to push R&D, to push those consoles to the next level. And somebody that's going to come in with a completely different paradigm and say, I'm going to disrupt this whole market. I think that kind of disruption is going to make PlayStation and Xbox better.
No, it 100% is. And the thing is, if we want to talk about this some other time too on one of the other podcasts, look at kind of the development history of how we got to Microsoft and Xbox today. It is fascinating to see how they both jumped into the space when, Nintendo was so far back, and they've taken over the space from Nintendo. But where and how did they get to that point? It came from some backdoor deals and things that almost required them to continue to put money into it. Otherwise, they would be screwed. Yeah. The whole thing is Google has the money. Google has the backing infrastructure. They just have to be willing to lose a decent amount of money for a couple years, like you said, to get into that space, to get to the point where they do have AAA games coming out from their own studios. They're able to go out and buy more studios. They have the infrastructure and the number of players on their platform, but it's going to be a rough ride until then. Now, The question is Google willing to take those losses for a year or two and really drive in and say, we want to be a part of gaming? Because how many people before them have tried to do that and have failed?
Well, and I think they need to capitalize on what makes them different. I mean, some of the things that, like the stacking the servers, the ability to make these massive, I mean, imagine if you could put 5 PlayStations together and make one game out of that. I mean, Google can do that with their systems right now. So maybe they're developing something. Maybe we're going to see something come out of that that's drastically different than anything we've ever seen before. 8-person couch co-op. I don't know. But it's possible, right?
Anything is possible with the cloud.
And the other thing I was going to say, it was interesting the number of people that I ran into when it came up to things about cloud gaming. And they're like, well, that's completely ridiculous. Like, why would I pay for a game that has to have access to the internet to be able to play it? And I looked through the games library and I'm like, well, you're playing 150 hours of Division 2. And literally you can't play that offline. And you're playing Fortnite and PUBG, and those require servers, and you're playing, the latest Call of Duty and, whatever else that's out there that requires this online server thing. And there are no offline modes. I mean, you can't play Overwatch offline.
No.
So we've been doing server-based gaming for a long time, but I don't know. I don't want to talk this thing to death. And I do have to go in here in a second.
I think to end this, though, I think the last thing would be just it would be cool to get your friend from Google back on at some point and see what he's allowed to talk about and see if, we can maybe – it's hard. Maybe we'd have to wait until he gets fired. I don't know. He leaves Google. It's like –
let's hope not.
What happened with the launch? What happened with this? What are the expectations? What are your guys' goals going forward? Is this really something that they are investing in and want to go forward? Which obviously they are because of the money they're throwing around. But again, for another time, that'd be cool to have on to talk to him again, post-launch rather than pre-launch. But
we're gonna wrap up this segment here in a second, and then hopefully we're gonna tag this with another segment. We're gonna talk specifically about some other things. So stay tuned after the break for the next segment for our first podcast here. And anything else you want to say? Wrap this one up?
No, I'm good with that. I'm looking forward to chatting more about this stuff.
Alrighty. Sounds good. Well, we will see you right after the break.
Crossfire! Yo, get caught up in the crossfire! 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 You'll get caught up in it.
Okay, so welcome back. We're going to go into our main topic for our podcast for today. And we're just going to kind of discuss what our goals and aspirations are for this podcast and for Crossfire going forward. And kind of just talk back and forth, discuss some of our ideas, what we might be looking for. And then our hope is that everybody can kind of give us some feedback after watching this or listening to this, for anything that they want to see changed, added, anything that they kind of see the direction of this going, and maybe they have some ideas as well. So David, with you being the person that started Crossfire, what are your hopes and dreams and goals going forward from this point on, now that we're at this point?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing for me is, I want to see Crossfire as a community. I want to see it as a place where people come, they engage, they deepen their faith with conversation with one another. I also want it to be a resourcing place, where people who are looking for resources for spirituality, for faith development, looking for news, looking for fellowship. I want it to be a resource place, but I also want it to be a conversation starter, kind of a catalyst for some of what I would say are the critical conversations around gaming and around faith that, maybe we're just not having yet. To tackle some of the tough topics that, I think some of the game developers are just now starting to tackle, issues of justice that I think are important to our world. Things like gender equality and, representation of, abilities. And also, we're seeing, like, last year we saw the release of the Xbox adaptive controller. I mean, that's huge. The ability for them to be able to get gaming in the hands of all peoples of all different abilities. I also want to talk about, gaming addiction and balance, and how to balance the positive sides of, gaming that can help kind of distract us from the crazy things that are going on in life and help get us through. But also, where do you draw that line between, something that's helpful and kind of provides peace to something that becomes an addiction and provides actually probably more stress in the attempts to satisfy that need. I want to have those conversations. Also conversations about, what sort of stories are we telling? What sort of messages are we telling when we play certain video games? Like, are the quality of the games and the quality of the content going to inform the way that we live in the world? And then how do we use what we know in the world to inform our decisions around what kind of games we play, what kind of games we develop? And then also, I think, what are the stories that we tell in terms of faith communities within our games? I'm fascinated by the portrayal of faith communities in games, with games like Far Cry 5, that kind of takes a look at the deep side of, faith community that becomes a cult, to, some of the other games that kind of play on the deeper aspects of faith and spirituality. I don't know. What would you say, Russ? What are your hopes and dreams for the podcast and for the community?
I would say very similar. I think right now, there's not really a very large niche as far as combining faith with gaming, and what that looks like. I think that's something a bit of a taboo. I know, working in churches and working with kids and working with adults, there's a very big misunderstanding of games and the role that they play in society. And I think as we go on even more and more, we're a generation that grew up on games, and we're continuing into our adulthood. And that wasn't really a thing 20, 30 years ago where adults played games. It was a kid's thing. And now as we go forward more, it's becoming more of an adult thing, but then it's also bridging the gap between different generations. And then my whole thing is, how does Christianity play a role in that? And what does that look like today? I think Christianity has, in the gaming sphere, has always had a bad reputation, because for the longest time, Christians were the ones kind of banging the drum against violent video games, against all of these terrible ideas. And it was like very anti-games. And we never really had any Christian-based games that were any good, for one. I mean, most of the Christian games are pretty bad games that came out, and they were more of a joke in the gaming community. And honestly, there is a Christian community out there developing new games, and I think being able to maybe give them a mouthpiece a little bit and kind of introduce that to more people would be a really fun, way to kind of push our agenda. And then just being able to give back, whether it's to the gaming community itself, and just show that we as Christians are a lot more giving and loving than I think we're portrayed sometimes in the media, and what that looks like for our group. So I think if we do that, and we kind of, give back to our community, start that community, and give a mouthpiece to different avenues, I think that would be a great a great direction for us to go. And it's definitely one that is not really existing out there in the space right now.
Yeah, and I think I want to jump back on something that you said about when we were growing up that older people didn't play games. People have always played games.
Oh yeah,
it's just a matter of what kind of games and what they look like. All the way back to the earliest games thousands of years ago to my grandparents. That my grandmother used to host a bridge meeting in her house once a week. And when I moved to this town, a bunch of people invited me to come out to the cribbage tournaments. And, so we've always played games. And, I even remember at one point thinking how weird esports was, the idea that people would watch somebody else play a game, until it dawned on me, like, that's literally what we're doing on Sundays when we watch Sunday afternoon football, is we're watching somebody else play a game. It's just a matter of, what we value in that game, and do we look at it as a purely athletic endeavor, or do we appreciate the strategy or the person and the mind behind the performance? You look at something like NASCAR. Like, NASCAR has never been about athleticism. NASCAR is about strategy and the ability to maneuver your car in the right area. But it's a person with a machine, right? So, computing is very similar, I think, in that realm. It's just a matter of, we're finally coming to a point where those of us who grew up on it are in the age that is mainly consuming and creating that content. And I do think, there's a whole conversation to be had around Christian media, right? Christian media in general has kind of come off as overly hokey, I would even say some of the media is too on the nose, right? That they're not really diving deep into exploring themes. It's like, let's just talk about Christianity and salvation and redemption. And it's like some of it comes off like reading a theology textbook. Where, it might be theologically sound, but it's not engaging in the same way that a deep storytelling is. And I think what I've been fascinated by is the rediscovery of the roots of our faith. Back to like the early, Jewish religious scholars and the early rabbis. And it has always been a tradition of deep storytelling and meaning making, and has only in the last 30 or 40 years has religion become about this kind of legalistic, fundamentalist interpretation of getting it right. So I'm fascinated by that kind of storytelling, and what are the stories that we tell in our games? How do they relate to the stories we've told in our faith? How does it deepen our understanding of the world?
Well, I'm interested in tackling and discussing some things, and eventually, finding some people and reaching out to people who are creating Christian games or are Christian game developers, because I do want to ask and talk to them and be like, okay, so what is your take on all this? Are you going for like a fully, straight line, straight edge Christian experience? Or are you trying to kind of bridge that gap and make a, fun storytelling game that maybe draws the line on that edge a little bit more, but still also relates back to Christianity, so that maybe non-Christians can enjoy the game just as much as Christians can? Because I think that might be some of the problems, is you get people who are non-believers and they get this thing thrown in their face and they're like, I don't want that. I have way too many options for that. So it'd be interesting just to find out more about that, find out more about what people believe and how they're tackling that system. And I think those are all things that I would love to explore as we go through this and get deeper in this.
Right. Yeah, and I'd be curious too, for people watching this podcast or listening to it. I'm curious what the community says. What do they want to explore? What are the topics that you all out there listening to this are wondering and engaging? And where do you see Christianity and gaming? Where do you see the intersection of those things? So Russ, what do you think the best way is that people can get us that kind of information?
So the best ways you guys can get us that information, we have our Facebook group. That's where the main community happens. So CrossFire Faith and Gaming is the name of the group. So feel free to join. We have a lot of discussion there. I think, regularly, where people are posting fun things to the walls and you have comments and a little bit of light discussion. We also have a Discord channel that we meet on every week, couple weeks or so, that can be kind of fun to get together. And then our hopes are in the future is to offer different things such as, game streaming, people to be able to join us maybe for multiplayer games, things like that. But I think the main one is going to be that Facebook, if you guys want to comment there, or obviously comment on the YouTube videos that these will be posted to, and then liking and subscribing to our Fit YouTube account so you know when our podcasts go live. And then hopefully we get these podcasts in audio form to different podcast services so that everybody can listen to it on the go or wherever you're at, and kind of come as you are type of thing. So I think those are kind of the best places that we can have that discussion and feedback on those things that you said, which I think would be a really helpful thing as we go forward and develop what this podcast actually is.
Yeah. And then I just want to say one last thing is that, we're a faith community. And so, you don't have to have a particular membership card or any sort of particular, background to be here. But I just want to let everybody know that wherever you are and whoever you are, that we do keep you in our prayers. I do think about the folks in our community every single day. And I hope that you're doing well out there, especially in these times that we're in right now. But, I hope that you're playing games that bring you joy and fun and relief. I hope that your faith development is where you want to be and that you're progressing on your faith journey. And I wish you well. And if there's ever anything that you need, feel free to reach out. I'm here as a pastor, both, a gamer and a pastor, and I'd be happy to chat with you and help out with anything you need. So I just want to make sure that I put that out there, that we're here for you.
Yep. And so I think that's going to probably end the first edition of the CrossFire podcast. Our hope is to try and get these out every couple of weeks or so, but we'll see as we go and see what the time brings and see how the response is to this. But our goal is to continue doing this, whether people are listening or not. And hopefully one day we get a few more people listening and come back to this very first episode and are able to check it out. So we look forward to going on this journey with everybody.
Yep. We will see you in the coming weeks.
God bless.
Crossfire.